Welcome, Reds, the 100% United pod. On today's show, I'll be digging into the Premier League's Project Restart, how the face of the game could change forever, and looking around Europe for clues and cues onto what to expect next in the football world with big news coming from France today. Then we'll look through the latest transfer stories with some interesting positive news about Thomas Partey's links to Manchester United. First, though, Premier League clubs are filtering back into their training grounds this week with a muted Project Restart meant to be bringing football back to our screens on June the 8th. Now, I say the teams are back in their training grounds, but at the moment, it's just individual players training on pitches. Apparently, you've got Arsenal, you've got Spurs back on their training grounds. What you've got is you've got one player per pitch. So it's not squad training together at all. They're still keeping their social distancing and all the rest of it. But it is a step towards football coming back in. Now, there's all these rumours going on about the Premier League's plans and to complete the season in effectively 50 days between June the 8th and July the 27th, completing it before UEFA's August Champions League and Europa League Fest, as they're planning. Interesting thing to note, the FA Cup is also set to be completed, quarterfinals, semi-finals and final, still to play in the FA Cup. So that is the plan. But as we'll go through, there's differing things going on around Europe and different decisions being made at the moment. I think the Premier League are just waiting to see what comes of the different decisions that the other leagues are making. Now, as I say, people are getting back into training. We mentioned on the last pod, Kieran McKenna said that we need 3 weeks to get back on the training field, to be back on the field. So the individuals are at home keeping fitness. That's what McKenna said. And what we'd need to do if we were going to start on June the 8th would be to all be back in proper training, all the clubs be back in proper training by May the 18th. There's a few little problems surrounding that. Now, the first one is the government's plan to bring in a quarantine for people arriving from abroad. So anyone who's been abroad will have to have 2 weeks in quarantine on arrival to the UK. Now, you've got a number of players who are actually abroad now. You've got managers as well, Pep Guardiola, to name but one, who is abroad as we speak. So that's one thing that they will need to iron out with the government, or will have to be factored into the timeline too. Another big bit of a funny one is Roy Hodgson is, of course, 72 years old. So technically, he shouldn't be allowed back to work on safety grounds. Crystal Palace are confident that he will get special dispensation to come back to work. They're not worried at all, but a little bit of a funny one surrounding Hodgson there. Now, as I say, people are filtering back into training. United aren't back yet. Of course, we've been training individually, but the plan is to get all players and staff tested. And one team that have sort of opposed that so far is Watford. Watford have said that they, on ethical grounds, they don't feel right using equipment and other resources that would be better off used by healthcare professionals and people who really, really need it. I know over in Spain, Celta Vigo have also refused on ethical grounds sort of personal protective equipment and tests as well. So that one thing, obviously, it has to be all in or all out with this. So that's one of the difficulties that the Premier League's facing with this. The other thing is they're obviously going to be behind closed doors if we manage to get the games going ahead. Now, the clubs want to do it in Premier League stadiums. They want to keep the stadiums. But there's also St George's Park, which is, of course, England's training ground and headquarters now. And also training grounds are considered. So clubs will play at the training ground like you see the under-23s and under-18s sometimes doing. Now, one thing to flag up there is the Premier League has got quite defined rules that you can't change stadiums in the middle of a season. I know Spurs faced this difficulty when they were playing some games at Wembley, and it seemed that it would sort of overlap. And of course, there's been special dispensation put out in the past. So I'm sure in these times they'll be able to rush something through. But it does sort of change the sort of, when you're talking about a level playing field, if you're playing games either in training grounds or, which is the other thing, is neutral territory, that it's not a continuation of the season as we've known. Now, that's one thing now, we're heading into the waters where what if we do try and complete this season, whatever way we do it, you can definitely say that the competition has not been consistent throughout, and that's the whole point of a league season. And that is why, I mean, my personal opinion is we're heading in the direction that we're not going to have football again this season, and they'll bin it and put it back in the autumn. But that's just my personal opinion. That's my hunch. Looking at other leagues and looking at the way it's going at the moment. Now, Project Restart have got a few interesting things that they'll be putting in place if football comes back. First of all, no handshakes. That's a no-brainer, isn't it? Of course, no handshakes at the start. No one liked them anyway. I think handshakes at the end are better than at the start anyway. No spitting. Now, that's an interesting one. It's kind of a habit. If you played sport and you do like to spit, it's something you just do naturally. So I don't know how that's going to go down. Balls being sterilised as well before the match, during the match, after the match, half time. But again, it's someone picks a ball up for a throw in, you then kick it, and then someone else heads it. You're going into an absolute minefield, and the minefield gets worse as well because there's also the idea that there's going to be no contact at corner kicks. Now, that is not only are we changing sort of the sort of what's going on in the league in terms of the grounds, the training grounds, and what else. We're actually changing the game. We're actually changing the way the game is played. Now, no contact at corners. I don't know how that's going to work, and as I'll get to in a minute, it might be if they do bring it back and they do have no contact at corners, it might be one of the things that sort of changes the face of the game forever. If you start having no contact at corners, I'm sure they'll try and continue that. I know FIFA's chief medical officer has said there should be yellow cards for unhygienic behaviour as well. So that's another thing that, again, would change the face of the game forever. A few other things that have been flagged up as well are 5 substitutions in the 2020 season and the 2021 season as well, just to sort of offset the mass amount of games that's going to be going on in a short period of time. And again, that might be something, once it's brought in, it kind of stays around, and that's the new way it is. I know Serie A asked the IFAB, the rule makers of the game, back in October 2019, I beg your pardon, to sort of think about bringing 5 subs in for all games. So it's something that's been discussed before. It's an interesting one, that. It's an interesting one. I know that the idea is that you'll only be able to use the 5 subs in sort of 3 stoppages. So you're going to go 2 and a 1 and a 2. You can't do 5 stoppages. So we're not going to have 10 stoppages effectively for substitutes. But it does change the game quite a lot. I mean, think about it there. You can change your whole defence. You can change your back 4 and your defensive midfield, or you can change your whole attack. And, it changes the face of the game so much that I'm personally not a fan. I follow a lot of different sports, and I thought rugby changed for the worse when they allowed mass amounts of substitutes. And you'd have people, I don't know, some people don't follow the game, but you could change the whole units of the team, and it just changes the whole dynamic. And then what you get is teams having tactics based around the subs. So everyone gives their all for, in rugby, 60 minutes, and then for the last 20, you've got your finishers coming on, as they call them, and you can kind of see the same sort of thing happening in football. Although obviously our manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is not the biggest fan of substitutes, despite the fact that he was a magical substitute himself, as we all know. But that is one of the things that, again, if they brought it in, you can see it staying around forever. If it's in there for 2 seasons. Another casualty, we'll talk about the TV pair, BT and Sky Sports, in a minute. But as I mentioned before, the 3 p.m. kickoffs in the Premier League would effectively be televised for the first time in decades. And it's been something that has been sacrosanct in British football, that 3 p.m. football does not get played. Even they don't even show when El Clasico was on and it clashed with a 3 p.m. kickoff in England on a Saturday. They couldn't show it on British TV. The whole point is to keep those games, those local games, well attended at 3 o'clock, as that's the traditional kickoff time. But that's another possible casualty from this whole fallout, that those games will be shown. Look, the idea is there's 47 games that BT and Sky have paid for already, and there's 45 others left. There's 92 games left of the Premier League season. Now, the 47 games that BT and Sky have already purchased will be still on their pay channels, so you'd have to have BT or Sky in order to watch those. However, the other 45 will be shown on those channels, but the idea is for them to be free. So either on the red button or some other method that they use. So you will be getting a load of football. They'll be getting a bit of their money back in terms of lost revenues, and of course the clubs will carry good favour with the two giants that fund them so much. So, I mean, that's the project restart that is mooted in the English game. And as I said, I think what they're going to do is they're going to watch what happens in Europe. They're going to watch how things play out over the next sort of week or so. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we've had big news from France today. Ligue 1, the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe of France, has said there will be no sport in France until September. Now, that is massive, massive news. Look, this is not just no sport. This is no sports, including behind closed doors. And the reason why this is such a whopper is that UEFA have penciled in August to complete the Europa League and the Champions League, and PSG and Lyon are still in Europe. So they are faced with either having to play the games abroad, their home games abroad, or, well, we don't know how the UEFA competition is going to be laid out yet. It could be all in one city anyway, and then in that case PSG and Lyon could travel over there. They'd obviously have to get a write-off, I guess, from Philippe, but that's one way around it. But it's another headache for UEFA, and it's another step towards everything getting binned. Another interesting thing to watch from France is that PSG are 12 points clear, and I think 10 games to play. So whether they get awarded the title or not will be, a massive thing to watch, because obviously we've got Liverpool, our ghastly rivals, who are ahead by quite a margin in the Premier League, and we're all desperate for them to continue their 30 years. Well, it's 30 years to the day today since they last won their title, which is a beautiful landmark, I must say. But it is interesting. The Eredivisie in Holland is cancelled. Now, the European spots have been done by the table, as requested by UEFA, but there's no promotional relegation, which is a big point in Holland, because there's a team 11 points clear in the second division there, and they are not happy at all. However, the top two are tied on points. So not giving a title out there seems a no-brainer. Ajax were ahead on goal difference, but when it comes to France, when you're 12 points clear, then it'll be a real signal as to what will happen in the Premier League, I guess. Although the Premier League is obviously a much more contested and big competition than Ligue 1. So we will see with that one. It is interesting, actually, in Holland. Ajax did say that they didn't want the title. They didn't want the title dished to them. So I wonder whether Liverpool would be big enough to say that they don't want to be handed a title on a plate either. Which I must say, from personal opinion, not just being a United fan, I don't think titles should ever be handed out on a plate. You've got to win the title. Even we're the experts in title races as fans. We've had more than any team in the last sort of 20 years and 25 years. And you and I both know you don't believe you got that title until you've mathematically done it. Even if you're 1 point clear, even if you're 1 point from winning the title, or you just need one more win with 6 games to go, you still are not sure you're going to win that title until you've got it. And that's always been the way. So I don't think you can go around dishing titles out, no matter how far ahead people are. I know quite a few people have said is that the Premier League want to just get back so that, first of all, Liverpool can get enough points to win the title. Let's not forget that the wheels were falling off before this big break either. I'm not saying they wouldn't have clinched the title, who knows. But the other thing is they'd like to have a bit more clarification in terms of the European spots, and of course the relegation spots as well, because they're all up for grabs. Sheffield United have got a game in hand. Interesting little bit of news about Sheffield United later, which links to Manchester United as well. So we will see with that. Obviously, those two leagues cancelled already. Now, Serie A want to get back. They want to get back playing, and they're testing all their players. Of course, Italy was a massively hit by this whole pandemic. Now, one thing the Italian ministers for sport said is that if one player tests positive, then it's all over. It's cancelled, which is, I mean, it's almost not worth coming back. If this is spreading like they say it is, then it seems that you'll spend all that money, all that infrastructure, book all these hotels, do all this stuff, and then one player goes down, it all goes down. So we'll watch for that. I know Germany are going a bit of a different direction. I'll get to them in a minute. La Liga over in Spain, they plan to test everyone as well, behind closed doors. Matches, I know Madrid and Barcelona are canvassing to get the games played at their training grounds so that they can get some stadium redevelopments done. And Celta Vigo, as I mentioned earlier, refused the tests on ethical grounds as it stands. So still loads of work to be done before La Liga gets back and Serie A get back. Barcelona have looked for assurances from the league that it is safe, and that's one of the big things. That these teams are not going to take the risk that they're going to be blamed for being irresponsible, for taking tests that other people should be taking. Obviously, legal action against them. So these are all massive hoops that have to be jumped through. And I guess the big one that we're looking at is the Bundesliga. They are looking to get back on May the 9th. There's been rumours of masks. There's been rumours of sinks by the pitch, and obviously testing the players all over the shop as well. I must say, wearing masks to play football, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I mean, I don't know if any of you have had to wear a mask or have been wearing a mask, and it's not the most comfortable thing. It can affect your sort of breathing as well over a long period of time. I wouldn't really like to go for a jog in one. So we'll see with that one. They've actually said that if a player tests positive, then they'll isolate that player and they won't necessarily cancel the league on the spot. A leading German doctor has actually warned that that's not going to wash, and the truth is that football is such a contact sport that if one player gets it, then it should be the whole team that's isolated and really the whole opposition as well. And like I mentioned earlier, with the ball being picked up, the ball being headed, there's all kinds of things. It's a blooming nightmare, really. And they're waiting for the government clearance. And that's actually something that looks like it is the way that it's going to go. It's going to be governments that are going to decide this, not actual leagues. I don't think any league wants to risk being the one that basically opens the can of worms, that starts something that they can be blamed for. We've already had people blaming footballers for not donating enough money and all the rest of it. And I just can't see anyone taking the risk that they're going to be the ones that are blamed. And another thing to watch, of course, is the UFC over in the States, mixed martial arts tournament, is going ahead in Florida. Now they're gonna do a Saturday, a Wednesday, and a Saturday, and they were actually intending to do a show in California on ungoverned land, on a place where the rules don't stand, in an Indian reserve, I think they call it. Now, with that, the interesting thing is they're going ahead in Florida, and the reason they're doing it is because the governor of Florida has said sport is essential. So therefore, the governor's on board, the state athletic commission is on board, which is a massive thing in America because they provide the referees, the judges, and all the rest of it as well, and a lot of the legal stuff. So again, it's the government that's making the decisions there. So even with the UFC that has sort of an almost dictator in Dana White leading it, and they have been adamant that they're going to be the first sport back. Again, it's come down to the government, really, the governors of the state, to give it the okay. They couldn't just run with it themselves. So again, that is another thing to watch, and we will see. I mean, the Premier League are due to meet again, of course, but I suggest they're going to watch what's happening in all these other leagues and sort of test the water, see what the Prime Minister says, and see if they can get football back. I would suggest don't hold your breath, but we'll see with that. So we'll get onto the transfers now. We've got some good news coming from Spain. First, little interesting one surrounding, as I said earlier, Sheffield United. Now, Dean Henderson's loan will have to be extended with our blessing. Now, it's interesting because, of course, we are Sheffield United, surprisingly, are actually challenging us now. So if the season did go ahead, we would have to sign that off. Now, I can't see that being a problem. I'm sure that United will sign that off. I think that Dean Henderson's had a great time at Sheffield United, and he's very fond of Sheffield United as well. I'd suggest we want to keep Henderson happy. I'd suggest we don't want to look like we are interfering with the integrity of the league, which would be an accusation that could be levelled at us. And I would suspect that will be the way it goes. But you know what? The problem is with this is that, you've got people like Willian at Chelsea. Now, Willian, looks like he wants to leave. He's been linked to a number of different clubs. Now, if you wanted to leave and you felt the club hadn't backed you, hadn't given you the contract you wanted, and then the club says, can you extend your contract by 2 months because, do us a favour. If you felt that you've been sort of shunned by them, that might be a little bit more of a tricky one. Whereas, of course, with Henderson, I think it'll be a gentleman's agreement and there won't be a problem. And of course, there's still a question mark over Odion Igalo as well. Now, he's still meant to be going back to China, and the question marks remain over that. And there has been rumours that we're after another striker, and that possibly we're waiting on that. It seems that might be the case. Otherwise, you would have thought we would have wrapped it up by now. Apparently, £15 million to get him on a full-time deal. But again, it's one that we just have to wait and see with. I guess we'll see what the dynamic is coming from the Premier League and where we're going to go in the next week or two, because his loan deal actually ends, I believe, at the end of May, which is unusual because normally the loan deals end at the end of June. That still is not going to work with the Premier League effectively looking to play 27 games in July as well. So we'll see with that one. And coming from Germany, again, Bild, a relatively reputable outlet over in Germany, have said that Dayot Upamecano has agreed a deal with Bayern Munich. Now, we mentioned on the pod that United had been looking at Upamecano, French under-21 international, centre-back, of course. Now, interesting one to look at there is that Bild have actually said that the deal's agreed with Munich, but the deal's not agreed with RB Leipzig yet. So he does have a £52 million release clause, but Bayern apparently are looking to just hold on and see whether transfer fees drop and see if they can't get him at a little bit of a cheaper price. So again, we'll have to watch out with that one and and see what plays out. But Bild are quite reputable, so we'll have to see. Over in Spain, AS have said that United are interested in Mohamed Salisu, Ghanaian centre-back. He's actually got £10 million release fee. 21-year-old centre-back as well as Upamecano, and comes a lot cheaper at £10 million. Sort of plays on the left side as a centre-back. So, look, £10 million seems a lot more comfortable a fee if we're going to strengthen at centre-back. We still don't know, of course, but that's one to keep your eye on, I'm sure. The Telegraph has said that West Ham are looking to sell Declan Rice, £17 million, say that we're in for him too. Now, I would say dropping £17 million on Declan Rice doesn't seem to be what we should be doing at the moment. That's a monster fee, and one that, certainly in this climate, I don't think that's going to wash at all. I think if they were to sell him, I can't see them getting £70 million in this climate at all. Another one, Ndidi over at Leicester, has actually said he's happy at Leicester. He's obviously a nice defensive midfielder who would seem to fit the mould if United are going to go for a defensive midfielder. He plays sort of almost exclusively as a defensive midfielder, so we'll see with that one. And but the big one is Thomas Partey of Atletico Madrid. We've mentioned before that Atletico Madrid have had problems financially, and they furloughed staff, as I mentioned before. Now, this is not technically called furloughing in Spain, but they have put staff on a government scheme. But Sadiq Adams, who's a Ghanaian journalist, of course, Thomas Partey is a Ghanaian international, has said that he's spoken to people close to Partey and said that he doesn't want to extend his contract at Atletico Madrid. He did join them in 2011, so he's been there a long, long time. He had a couple of loan spells at the beginning within Spain, and then since 2015, he's been to the first team there. So this is a really interesting one. He can play defensive midfield, as we know. He can also play central midfield too. So he comes with a bit of flexibility in terms of position, but he does fit that mould. I think with the midfielders that we've got, I think he fits the bill in terms of the kind of, he's very combative, very athletic. He's good with the ball at the feet, and he's more of the warrior type. And I would say fitting into this team, sort of the different types of midfielders that we've got at the moment. You've got Bruno, who's added a little bit of sort of aggression at the top of the midfield. Adding that little bit of aggression at the bottom of the midfield would be very, very useful indeed. Of course, we've got Scotty McTominay back there, who's come through and is improving all the time. I think that the big thing with United is that we've got this team that has just developed so much recently. And if you added in a Thomas Partey in midfield and possibly a Jadon Sancho up top, then you are looking at a massive, massive improvement to a squad that is already seeming to go in the right direction. So, I mean, that's one that I think all United fans are getting very excited about indeed. RMC over in France have said that PSG are also inquiring out Partey as well, and have said that PSG might be one of the teams, along with United, who do have the financial wherewithal to make some moves this summer and really try and sort of United certainly close the gap with some of the teams that have stolen a march on us. So I think good news. Sadiq Adams is quite a reputable journalist, and of course with those Ghanaian links, we'll be keeping a keen eye on that one. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. Hit subscribe wherever you get your pods, and follow at United 100 Podcast on Instagram. I'll be back on Friday with Scott alongside me again for greatest Man United 11 of the Sir Alex Ferguson era. So we'll be just picking our best players 1 to 11, maybe some subs as well. That'll be a bit of fun. And until then, take care, look after yourselves. Until Friday, cheerio, Reds.